In this jaw-dropping episode of Africa Before the Lie, we expose the untold genius of mud architecture and climate intelligence in ancient African cities. Places built without stone, yet engineered to withstand time, heat, rain, and empire after empire. They were labeled primitive, but the truth is far more brilliant. From earthen skyscrapers taller than medieval cathedrals to climate-smarter communities that outlast modern design, this is the forgotten architectural legacy that rewrites history. They mocked it, they underestimated it. They called it primitive, a fragile art of mud and earth that should have washed away with the first heavy rain. Yet the rains came, seasons passed, empires rose and fell, and still those cities stood, textured like sculpture, breathing with the climate, engineered to cool their people and shield their archives of knowledge. This is the untold story of Africa's mud-built marvels, where architecture was not merely shelter, it was science. From Djenné to Timbuktu and far beyond the Sahel, these cities were carved in harmony with the land, not in defiance of it. Walls that inhaled desert heat, roofs that channeled wind, courtyards that regulated light. A living climate intelligence centuries ahead of the industrial age. And while the world crowned stone as civilization's ultimate symbol, Africa quietly perfected a system that outlasted empires, earthquakes, colonial invaders, and even time itself. So the question is not why these cities were built without stone. The question is how, in a world drenched in steel and concrete, their ideas still feel futuristic. Because the lie was never that Africa lacked sophistication. The lie was that the world ever understood what sophistication truly meant. In this episode, we dismantle one of the most persistent historical illusions, that architectural sophistication requires stone, steel, or concrete. Instead, we reveal ancient African cities that mastered mud not as a rudimentary material, but as a deliberate, intelligent system, engineered for environment, community, and endurance. Viewers will discover the science behind thermal regulation, ancient construction rituals, and how these cities quietly outlasted invaders and empires. This isn't just history. It's a revolution in how we understand innovation. Imagine a city built without stone, concrete, or steel, yet capable of surviving centuries, enduring empires, and outlasting the colonial lens that dismissed it as primitive. Welcome to a forgotten truth. Ancient African civilizations that built towering structures and thriving urban centers from Earth itself. These cities weren't relics of survival, they were blueprints of brilliance. They understood the land, mastered the climate, and created architectural ecosystems that modern designers are only now beginning to rediscover. For centuries, the story of Africa has been told by outsiders who ignored the continent's ingenuity. European explorers wrote of vast mud cities with disdain, mistaking simplicity for savagery. They could not fathom that these so-called primitive cities operated on sustainable systems far ahead of their time. But what if mud wasn't a compromise, but a choice? A conscious scientific adaptation to an environment many couldn't survive, let alone thrive in. In this episode, we uncover a powerful story buried, sometimes literally, beneath the sands of colonial distortion. From the Sahel to the Sudanese deserts, civilizations harnessed the very soil beneath their feet to craft environments cool enough to live in during scorching heat, resilient enough to handle torrential rains, and strong enough to last generations. And they did it not with imported materials, but with knowledge passed through ancestors and artisans alike. We begin our journey in Djenné, Mali, home to the largest mud brick structure in the world, the Great Mosque. But this isn't just a religious monument, it's a technological marvel. Every year, a community comes together in a festival of repair, plastering the structure, celebrating the knowledge that keeps it alive. It's not just architecture, it's living memory. And Djenné is only one of many cities built upon the genius of Earth. So how did we come to erase this chapter of human brilliance? Why do school books still overlook the architectural wonders of pre-colonial Africa? The answers lie in power, perception, and propaganda. By labeling mud cities as lesser, colonial regimes justified domination. But the truth is more radical. These cities were models of climate-smart innovation, engineered for sustainability long before climate change became a global emergency. This episode isn't about nostalgia, it's about rediscovery and correction. As we walk through the story of cities built without stone, we're not just learning about architecture. We're confronting the stories we were told and reclaiming the stories that were hidden. Because sometimes what they called primitive was actually genius. Let's dig in. At its core, mud architecture is the use of earth, specifically clay, silt, and sand, combined with water and sometimes natural binders like straw or dung to form durable construction materials. But don't mistake its simplicity for a lack of sophistication. The methods developed across Africa were nuanced, evolving over millennia. These techniques included adobe, cob, rammed earth, and wattle and daub, each tailored to local climates, terrains, and cultures. The earth was not just available, it was purposeful, responsive, and in harmony with its surroundings. Ancient African architects weren't merely building shelters, they were crafting climate-responsive ecosystems. Walls were thick to absorb and release heat slowly. Roofs were sloped or grooved to handle seasonal rains. Even the orientation of buildings followed principles of airflow, sun path, and seasonal rhythms. In many ways, they achieved what modern green architecture aspires to: passive heating and cooling, local sourcing, and minimal ecological disruption. From the Sahel Belt to the Horn of Africa, each region developed its own mud architecture lineage. In Mali, sun-dried bricks formed grand mosques and homes, with wooden tehrangs for aesthetic rhythm and scaffolding. In northern Nigeria, Hausa architecture thrived with palaces, mosques, and homes, featuring intricately molded facades. Sudanese structures bore thick, buttressed walls and natural ventilation towers, testaments to architectural innovation rather than survival. One of the most misunderstood aspects of mud architecture is its longevity. Western narratives painted it as temporary, but these buildings often last hundreds of years, with regular maintenance integrated into the community's seasonal rhythms. In fact, what makes these structures alive is their ability to be renewed, repaired, and reshaped. Mud walls aren't static. They breathe, flex, and evolve with time. Even in the language of materials, there's a philosophical divide. Western construction tends to value permanence and resistance, while African mud architecture values adaptability and relationship with nature. This isn't inferiority, it's a different worldview, one that sees architecture as part of a living system, not an imposition upon it. A worldview deeply ecological in practice before eco-friendly was a term. To call mud architecture primitive is not just historically inaccurate, it's intellectually lazy. What we see in these structures is an entire science rooted in indigenous knowledge, empirical testing, and communal memory. These were not the desperate measures of underdeveloped societies. They were deliberate, refined choices by civilizations that understood something modernity is still catching up to: how to build with the land, not against it. Let's begin with Jenne, Mali, home to one of the most iconic structures in Africa, the Great Mosque of Jenne. Built in the 13th century and rebuilt in 1907, it remains the world's largest mud brick building, but its grandeur isn't just in its size. It's in the collaborative engineering that keeps it alive. Every year, the people of Jenne gather in a massive communal festival to replaster the mosque with fresh mud. Its architecture not as a frozen relic, but as a living ritual passed from generation to generation. Travel northeast and you reach Timbuktu, another Sahelian masterpiece. Once a beacon of Islamic scholarship and trade, Timbuktu flourished as a cultural and intellectual hub in the 14th to 16th centuries. Its mosques, like Sankore and Djinguereber, were built with local earth and wood, combining scientific precision with cultural reverence. These buildings were designed to regulate temperature, absorb noise, and withstand Saharan sandstorms without a single stone in sight. In northern Nigeria, the ancient city of Kano showcases the brilliance of Hausa architecture. The city walls, dating back to the 11th century, were constructed from mud but built to withstand invasion. The Emir's palace, with its detailed ornamentation and symbolic carvings, stands as a testament to a long tradition of architectural expression tied to political and spiritual power. These buildings were more than shelters, they were statements of identity. Moving east to Sudan, we find the Nubian mud brick domes that have weathered over 1,000 years of history. Known for their use of corbelled arches and vaulting techniques, Nubian builders created cool, insulated interiors ideal for desert living. The elegant curvatures of these homes and tombs weren't just aesthetic, they were structural solutions to environmental demands. Even in the Horn of Africa, similar stories echo. In Ethiopia's Harar Jugol, one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in Africa, narrow alleyways snake through homes made of earth and stone blends. Though some structures incorporated stone, the binding material, insulation, and inner cores were earth-based, demonstrating the flexibility and resilience of mud architecture adapted to highlands and social density. Each of these cities was a world unto itself, technologically adapted, spiritually resonant, and economically central. They shared no blueprint yet arrived at similar architectural truths. Earth is not a fallback, it's a foundation. These case studies are not just historical footnotes. They are evidence that Africa was and is a continent of builders, and these legacies still stand, challenging the myths that tried to erase them. Mud architecture doesn't just stand up against the elements, it works with them. In a continent where climate ranges from arid deserts to tropical savannas, ancient African builders learned how to manipulate the very materials beneath their feet to create thermal balance. Mud walls, often over a foot thick, act like batteries, absorbing heat during the day and releasing it at night. This passive climate control kept interiors cool without fans and warm without fire long before air conditioning ever existed. The secret isn't just in the mud itself, but in how it's used. In Sahelian regions, roofs were flat with slight gradients for water runoff, while in wetter zones, builders used pitched or grooved roofing to shed torrential rain. Plastered exteriors, sometimes mixed with shea butter or cow dung, created waterproofing systems more durable than early industrial techniques. These materials weren't poor man's substitutes. They were sophisticated answers to nature's challenges. Ventilation was another genius innovation. Narrow doorways, small windows, and strategically placed openings created air channels that drew cool breezes while keeping out dust. In Sudan and northern Nigeria, builders incorporated high parapets or towers to catch upper-level winds. These features acted as natural AC units, maintaining habitable temperatures even in blistering climates. Sunlight, too, was managed with architectural wisdom. In many mud cities, streets were intentionally narrow and winding, not for confusion, but for shade. Buildings were aligned to maximize shadow coverage during peak heat hours. Courtyards inside homes served as thermal buffers, pockets of cool, humid air around which daily life revolved. This wasn't survivalist living. It was precise, predictive design honed by generations of observation. What's even more astonishing is that these techniques required no fossil fuels, no imported materials, and no synthetic insulators. They were carbon neutral long before sustainability became a buzzword. In fact, if scaled globally, these architectural principles could drastically reduce modern construction's carbon footprint. Mud architecture isn't just relevant, it's revolutionary in a world facing climate crisis. So, when they said these buildings were primitive, they missed the plot entirely. Mud wasn't just molded into walls, it was molded into wisdom. African builders had cracked the code of thermodynamics, hydrology, and sustainable design without ever writing textbooks. This was science done with bare hands, and results that lasted centuries. Mud became mastery, not because it had to, but because it could. Mud architecture in Africa is more than a technical achievement, it's a cultural cornerstone. The buildings themselves are woven into the social fabric, reflecting community identity, spiritual belief, and generational legacy. Each curve of a dome, every carved motif, and all those carefully packed bricks represent more than utility. They embody ritual, heritage, and meaning. These structures were never just built. They were born through collective memory and purpose. In cities like Zaria and Kano, walls were not only defense mechanisms, they told stories. Decorative patterns in the plaster communicated lineage, social status, or even moral values. The facades of Hausa homes, adorned with intricate geometric designs, spoke a visual language understood by the community. Architecture was art, it was language, and it was a declaration of who the people were. Architecture also mirrored social organization. In traditional compound layouts, one could read the hierarchy and harmony of the household. Central courtyards unified families, outer rooms protected inner sanctuaries. The way homes were arranged reflected gender roles, spiritual beliefs, and intergenerational relationships. These layouts weren't random, they were blueprints of social cohesion. Ceremonial structures like shrines, palaces, and mosques were even more profound. In Mali, the annual replastering of the Great Mosque in Djenné is a sacred ritual. It's not just maintenance, it's communal affirmation. Everyone participates, from children to elders, bonding through the act of preservation. This tradition turns architecture into a living ceremony, a performance of culture that renews both structure and spirit. Even the materials themselves carried cultural meaning. Earth was not inert, it was ancestral. Many communities believed that building with mud returned them to the land spiritually. It created a loop of life, born from the earth, living with the earth, returning to it. In this sense, mud buildings were both homes and monuments, shelters and spiritual anchors. To overlook the cultural dimension of these structures is to misunderstand them entirely. African mud architecture is a physical manifestation of worldview, a sacred intersection of nature, community, and identity. These aren't just ancient buildings, they are ancestral blueprints. Each wall tells a story, each home holds a history, and together they whisper a truth louder than any myth. We were never primitive, we were profound. The tragedy of African mud architecture isn't that it was forgotten, it was intentionally erased. Colonial narratives didn't just overlook these structures, they actively undermined their value. European travelers and scholars described Africa's earthen cities as unsophisticated or crude, despite their durability and beauty. They reduced entire civilizations to caricatures, their ingenuity dismissed because it didn't conform to European notions of progress. These narratives served a purpose. They justified colonization. If African cities were primitive, then European intervention could be framed as civilizing rather than exploitative. The erasure of architectural achievements was part of a broader campaign to paint Africa as a blank slate, a place without history, culture, or complexity. Mud buildings, no matter how advanced, were invisible under this lens. The impact of this distortion is still felt today. Educational curricula around the world continue to emphasize Greco-Roman ruins and Gothic cathedrals, while the mud mosques of Timbuktu or the palaces of Kano barely earn a footnote. Museums overflow with artifacts taken from African cities, yet the cities themselves remain absent from architectural history books. This selective memory sustains a global imbalance of cultural legitimacy. Worse still, many African nations internalize these colonial views. Urban planning in post-colonial Africa often favored concrete and steel, importing Western styles rather than celebrating indigenous genius. Mud buildings were demolished, replaced by glass towers that wilted under the climate. A legacy of architectural excellence was replaced with borrowed blueprints and unsustainable mimicry. But cracks are forming in this imposed silence. Architects, historians, and cultural custodians across Africa are reclaiming what was lost. Initiatives are reviving earthen architecture not just as heritage, but as innovation. They're challenging academia, rewriting syllabi, and proving that African architectural traditions belong not only in history, but in the future. The great understatement is that mud cities were less than. The truth? They were more than we imagined. More adaptive, more sustainable, more socially integrated. By lifting the veil of colonial distortion, we begin to see African mud architecture for what it really is, a masterclass in environmental design, cultural intelligence, and human ingenuity, and it's time the world caught up. In a world rapidly hurtling toward ecological breakdown, the ancient wisdom of African mud architecture feels less like a memory and more like a blueprint for survival. As climate change accelerates and cities become hotter, more polluted, and more expensive to build and cool, architects are looking backward to move forward. The design principles embedded in Africa's earthen cities offer scalable, sustainable alternatives that modern technology has yet to match in elegance or efficiency. Earthen construction is gaining renewed interest in global architecture circles. From eco-villages in Europe to passive homes in North America, sustainable builders are now borrowing techniques long practiced in Africa. Rammed earth walls, adobe insulation, and thermal mass design are praised as innovative, but they've existed for centuries in places like Jena and Kano. The future of green building, it turns out, is rooted in African tradition, and the benefits are undeniable. Earthen materials are cheap, abundant, and locally sourced, reducing reliance on carbon-heavy concrete and steel. Their thermal properties drastically cut energy consumption, while their biodegradable nature ensures minimal environmental waste. When paired with contemporary engineering, these techniques become even more powerful. It's not a choice between tradition and progress, it's a fusion of both. But adoption isn't just a matter of science, it's a matter of pride. For too long, African architectural knowledge was shamed into silence. To reclaim these techniques is to reclaim confidence, autonomy, and dignity. Imagine cities across Africa rising from their own soil again, not out of necessity, but out of knowledge. Schools, homes, even office buildings made from earth. Not because they're cheap, but because they're brilliant. Policy, too, must catch up. Governments and urban developers need to incentivize earthen construction, integrate it into building codes, and invest in artisans who carry this generational knowledge. This isn't just about aesthetics, it's about resilience, sustainability, and economic empowerment. African mud architecture could become a leading export, not just of culture, but of climate adaptation strategy. The lesson is clear. Africa has been holding a climate solution all along. Hidden in the clay of ancient cities lies a roadmap to a cooler, cleaner, more connected future. Mud, once dismissed as a symbol of lack, may very well be the substance that saves us. What was called primitive could become humanity's most advanced tool in the fight for survival. As we conclude this journey through Africa's cities built without stone, one truth echoes louder than any colonial myth. Mud architecture is not a relic of the past. It's a vision for the future. These structures, formed by hands that understood earth, wind, water, and time, defy every label history tried to place on them. They are enduring testaments to human intelligence, environmental harmony, and cultural depth that the modern world is only beginning to appreciate. We've walked through ancient streets that shaded life, touched walls that breathed with the seasons, and entered spaces shaped not by wealth, but by wisdom. These buildings whisper stories, not of poverty or lack, but of precision, pride, and purpose. To recognize their value is to recognize the value of African genius, often hidden beneath layers of historical distortion. Reclaiming this narrative isn't just an act of historical justice, it's a necessity. The climate crisis demands innovation rooted in sustainability. Urban overdevelopment demands models of community, not just concrete. Africa's architectural heritage offers both. And in reviving these traditions, we don't simply honor the past. We prepare for a smarter, more resilient tomorrow. This episode is a call to remember, but also a call to act. To teachers, integrate these stories into your lessons. To architects, look back before you design forward. To governments, empower the builders who carry this legacy. And to all of us, see these cities for what they are, not ruins of a forgotten world, but blueprints of brilliance. The cities built without stone were never primitive. They were intentional, they were intelligent, and they are still standing, not just as buildings, but as monuments of a truth too powerful to be buried. The next time someone tells you Africa contributed little to the story of civilization, show them a mud wall that's lasted 700 years and ask them, what's more advanced than that? Thank you for watching this episode of Africa Before the Lie. If this story moved you, inspired you, or opened your eyes, make sure to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel for more untold truths. The lie ends here. The real story is just beginning.